font.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm glad it's in a bigger font.
Welcome to the October 8, 2019 regular board meeting of the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. The meeting's hereby called to order. Will you please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance?
Down.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
President Andrews.
Present.
Vice President Mason.
Present.
Director Lassane.
Present.
Director Mitchell.
Present.
Director Nankar.
Present.
Student Representative Hussein.
Present.
Student Representative Tran.
Present.
Thank you. Our first item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Saltzman, will you please introduce this afternoon's agenda?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the superintendent's report, segment for public comments, segment for routine business, segment for strategic progress monitoring, segment for unfinished business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes have been made. Item 6.01, superintendent's report was added. Item 10.01, annual student achievement reports. The presentation and attached report were revised to correct clerical errors. The board may elect to change order of business by a majority vote of the members.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Mason and seconded by Director Lassane to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Agenda is adopted. Section 5.0, recognition. There are no recognitions this afternoon, so we'll move on to Section 6.0, the superintendent's report.
Good evening. First off, before I begin this evening, I just want to remind the community it's flu season, and try to get your flu shot if needed, because we want everybody healthy and safe and happy this year. I have some very good news that I'd like to report on this evening. The list of Washington State's National Merit Scholarship semifinalists was released last month, and the 4 students from Jackson High School were named National Merit Scholarship semifinalists. Juliana Mothersbaugh, Amelia Peterson, Bronco Rowe, and Ethan Fong. I want to congratulate them and their families.
It's in that picture.
October is National Principals Month. When you address student achievement, there's 2 key factors: the classroom teacher and the leadership in the building as principal. October is the month to honor those principals. A secret to student success is a well-run school, and the key to that is an outstanding principal. From leadership to teacher evaluation, to student discipline, and to instruction. The principal has an essential and sometimes difficult job, but the best job in any school district. This month, we salute the great principals and assistant principals in our fine district. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month to raise awareness of the employment needs and contributions of individuals with all types of disabilities. Everett Public Schools celebrates the contributions of the workers with disabilities and values a workforce that is inclusive of their skills and talents. National Custodian Appreciation Day was Wednesday, October 2nd. Hooray for our custodial staff, dedicated to keeping our schools in tip-top shape. They work behind the scenes, doing their best to make our buildings sparkle and run smoothly. We cannot do this important work without them. District staff showed their appreciation on Wednesday to some of our hardest working members of our team. Kudos and thank you to the custodial staff, members of our team that are unnoticed many times. This last week was the trade-up event at Cascade High School. Held during the school day, students had an opportunity to have hands-on experience with a variety of careers. Many community partners shared a glimpse into their professions with interested students. Thank you to the Everett Police Department, Everett Fire Department, and many other businesses for providing students with this unique learning opportunity. iReady update. iReady is happening in our classrooms across the district. Second graders in Ms. Shouten's class at Monroe Elementary School are busy learning with iReady, and Evergreen Middle School completing their iReady diagnostic. Teachers use that data to guide instruction. The iReady with each student where they get online, customize lessons, pinpointing where they are in their learning. Teachers are able to teach more effectively when they know how each student is doing. Individualized learning paths lead to greater success. Way to go, team. And then last week, many curriculum nights took place across our district. There were a variety of activities at each school to help parents better understand student curriculum. This week, we saw many tweets about the engaging and meaningful parent learning that happened at our schools. And over the past 2 weeks, the district's comprehensive high schools held their annual high school and beyond college and career preparation events. These events hosted elementary, middle, and high school students and their families and shared information about amazing programs at colleges and trade schools across the country, as well as a variety of opportunities available to our students. It takes everybody to have those things happen, from K through 12, for all staff, all principals, and central office to make that great event happen. I want to thank everybody for a great week, as I visited many schools this week and so far early in this week, the 2 days, and great things are happening in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of nice events to engage our parents and community. We will move on to Section 7, Board Comments. This is an opportunity for directors and student representatives to share their activities and comments as they relate to board service. So let's start with Director Nankar.
Thank you, Madam President.
You're welcome.
I had the opportunity to go with Tracy and Dr. Saltzman to the legislative conference in Spokane. Was it last week? 2 weeks ago, I think. Yeah, and it was very interesting. As much as I feel like I've learned quite a bit in about over a year here as a director on the school board, but from the advocacy piece, the discussions that were hot topics, sort of. You get to see what are the things that all the school districts are talking about, and what are the hot topics, or what is in terms of advocacy when you talk to legislators and stuff. And no surprise there. Social, emotional, special ed, CTE, school safety, etc. Those were the hot topics, and it was almost across the board. And I think in our report we've also, Tracy, you did the I guess we worked together in terms of identifying our top 15 or so priorities. But it was really useful for me, and I appreciate Tracy sort of egging me along to go to Spokane and attend the conference. And speaking of flu season, yeah, I was down most of last week, so it is. Not a pleasant experience, but I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Let's just move to your left and Student Representative Tran.
Okay, thank you. So my comment today starts with something from a little while back with the Superintendent Candidate Committee, when we first met Dr. Saltzman with the student portion of that committee. And I remember hearing you encourage us to facilitate meetings with all of our high schools, ASBs, and student representatives. And we have planned some meetings throughout the year, and we're hopeful to learn from each other and then share how we can increase participation in student events through all of our high schools, and talk about how we as student leaders can help promote greater mental health support in education, not just at Cascade, because that's what we've been working on, but throughout Jackson, Everett, and Sequoia High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Student Representative Hussein.
For this week, it's homecoming week next week. So for now, we're just trying to get everything situated. We have a bunch of themes laid out, and for this year, our past themes were kind of like exclusive to people that like couldn't afford certain things to make like everyone participate. So this year we focused on more participation at school, and hopefully this year or homecoming week will go by smoothly, and homecoming will be great because we have the Friday off before homecoming. So hopefully everyone's rested and ready to go to homecoming dance.
Sounds like fun. Director Lassane.
Yes.
I've had a great opportunity to be in the schools this past couple of weeks, and I really enjoyed it. I had an opportunity to stop over at Woodside Elementary for their literacy night and get to meet some of our, families there. It's really, really important that kids have the opportunity to bring their mom and dad to school and allow their mom and dad to be able to see what is going on in the classroom or what is taking place in the library. This happened to be in the library, and I think it's really neat to, actually see the kids pull mom and dad in and sit them down and say, this is how I get on the computer at school. This is how I do this, so that their parents can see how engaged they are and also learn some of the things that are going on. So that's kind of cool. I really like that. I also had an opportunity to stop over at Emerson and see a demonstration of iReady in Miss Blackstock's third grade classroom. It's amazing how kids remember third grade. I think it's really funny because I remember my third grade teacher, Mrs. Wade. I don't remember any of the other teachers, and if anybody is listening, please, it's not that I don't, think first and second and fourth and fifth were really great classrooms, but Mrs. Wade, it was something else. She was an amazing teacher. And so Mrs. Blackstock reminded me of Mrs. Wade, where she engaged the student and she sat down with one student and showed how iReady is, how that student can look at the results of iReady and can identify goals for himself going forward and how to improve in reading and math. So I'm getting excited about that, and I would like to see that more often. I'd like to see how it is analyzed, and I would like to see how more teachers are using that and to see the fidelity of its use in our district. So I'm excited about that. That was really nice. I remember third grade. So Mrs. Blackstock, you did an outstanding job. I also happened to attend Snohomish STEM Summit on the 1st of October with Dr. Dana Riley Black over there. And it's really important for us to remember that it's important to bring in women and minorities into science, technology, and, engineering and math. And the arts are not to be persuaded by. I am a big proponent of the arts, especially music. And so it's important that we bring all students up and we try to get them into the internship programs that are out there for them. And I'm glad we are partnering with Snohomish STEM, because there are a lot of businesses that were there that realize that the workforce of tomorrow is in high schools today. And we need to make sure that they have an opportunity to meet our students, engage our students, and show our students what the workforce of tomorrow is going to look like. So I think that's important. I mentioned music and STEM and how it's so tied together. I also had the opportunity to see the President's own Marine Corps band play. And that was an outstanding performance. You're never, you're always excited about going to see the bands when they come, the military bands when they come. And I would like to also thank Everett High School and Mrs. Venter especially, because she was the one who sponsored the President's own Marine Corps band to come to Everett, along with the Herald and the Everett Public School. But, it was really great that some of the band members had the opportunity to go into the classrooms before they played and actually have some, teaching moments with our students. I got to meet also Master Sergeant Tracy Paddock, who plays clarinet. And she happened to also attend Everett High School that day before and teach the kids something in a classroom about a professional musicians and what their skills are and what they had to study, and talk about all of that, how they got to where they got, where they are, and the amount of time it took to get there, and the engagement that they had to be very well prepared to do something like that. So I think it's important Again, that same partnership with professionals and businesses to teach the kids today what it's like for tomorrow and what's necessary in being a professional once they do graduate. So there's a lot of connection there, and so it's really neat to be able to meet the teachers that are engaged in that work. And I was very glad I had a chance to meet teacher Miss Venter, so that was great.
Thank you. Director Mitchell?
Oh, thank you. And my third grade teacher was Miss Shoemaker, and she got married, so she was Miss Nation. And she was I think my very first hero, because she got married. And she also made me, she also saw my gift of math, which I lost in high school but gained again. Flu shot, I got it, and I made sure my family got it. So everybody knows most insurance plans pay for it 100%. You can go to any pharmacy in Washington and get it done. And the pharmacist, you don't even feel it. It's got a little sting and then it's done. The new flu shot, though, it's pretty powerful. You will feel like a little ache for a little bit, but it's very essential. So thank you, Dr. Saltzman, for mentioning that. I'm going to thank Dr. Saltzman and John Young for coming with me to the Legislative Assembly this year. There were some interesting conversations, and John Young and I did go through and collaboratively decide on what we thought should be the priorities for WASDA. Jeff and I are going to meet next week to talk about what the district's priorities might be based on what WASDA has, what WASA has, and that what could be possible for this coming legislative session. I will say that two of the longer discussions were about teacher salaries and who will negotiate, what kind of plan will there be, and where do we want to stand behind that or not stand behind that. And then a second one, which gave me great pause, was about lowering credits required for graduation. And I sort of argued with, are you lowering graduation standards? And nowhere in it did it say Core 24. Nowhere in it did it say things like that. And they were arguing really against Core 24, but it was saying lowering credits. And so I did argue against lowering graduation standards. And the vote was, though, that we would suggest lowering credits. And so that's what WASDA voted on. So that's just how it was. But we all were able to see the first snow of the year in Spokane.
Oh my God.
So that was interesting to have the pilot say that we were going from fall to winter like that. And so he's de-icing the plane. Then I'm very thankful to Sally for showing me around Penny Creek, and even though I know Penny Creek quite well, but introducing me to teachers that I hadn't met because I too wanted to see iReady in real life. Penny Creek has been on iReady for 3 years now, and talking to an HC teacher, Kirsten Judd, who said that she has the most incoming HC kids, and so knowing my daughter and her struggles with math, she is able to see where they are and get them caught up. She did caution that some of the kids are going faster than her, so she has to redirect those kids. But then talking to another teacher, and who I do not remember the name, though, about given iReady, that her kids scored in the 96 percentile or percent for one of the SBA tests, and I don't know if it was math or ELA, but she corrected us from her 95 to 96%. And really does attribute the correlation between the two, which was nice to see. And then also seeing a teacher who is the Achieve teacher, and talking about getting the Achieve students into the classroom, but that her classroom is always a safe place when the kids need to come back. And to learn more about that program was I think, really essential for what we do on the school board. Then yesterday, Darcy and Sally took me around to View Ridge, Madison, Jackson, and Lowell, so that I could really see for myself what Molly did. Molly and Darcy took me around to look at those schools so that I could see for myself really what is going to be on this bond that we're voting on tonight, what's really needed, what could be the options. Madison has a huge piece of property. That was really cool to see. And just great staff that Molly, and they both introduced me to a lot of people. But a teacher at Jackson, speaking of iReady and Fidelity, 5th grade teacher, and I noticed that she had iReady up on her whiteboard. Timing is a timing thing. And I asked about it, and she said, well, that Catherine Matthews had suggested they actually schedule it, and then it might happen. And so she said she's doing her best. And so I think that the call out for everything that's happening is great. And then just one last thing. Pharmacists in Washington, I think I've mentioned this probably a couple years ago, but it just came up again from the Pharmacy Commission, are required to get training in suicide, but they attach some really nice flyers for families, for youth and suicide, and for families and suicide. And so I forwarded the email to Ian, because I think there are some nice flyers that maybe we could share on, they're made from the Department of Health, that we could put on our own websites about, especially for pharmacists, it's suicide with medications and weapons. And so how to lock up medications and things. But I think it's a good reminder, so I did forward them on. But it, like Pam, a busy week, and sorry I talk so fast.
Thank you. Director
It
Mason.
is. Directors are busy.
Well,
I just wanted to start by mentioning our special meeting last Tuesday night and the opportunity to look at the state assessment data, which we will delve into a little bit deeper with Dr. Matthews tonight. But just sort of my takeaways from that initially, I think Everett does really well. Actually, I don't think I know Everett does really well. And I think we do a really good job with students of different backgrounds, both low income and populations of diversity. We certainly do better than the state, and we certainly do better than almost all our peers. But I am a little bit troubled by just the gaps of achievement, not between high income and low income, but just in the number of students that actually meet the benchmark of passing state assessments. And it just calls out to the fact that even though we're doing quite well, we still have a lot of work to do, and there's always a lot of opportunity to fine-tune our systems, which is a challenge and an opportunity. So kind of exciting to look forward to how we can best do that. Last night I attended the school board candidate forum, and our own director Nankar was there answering questions from the community, and they took them, submitted them both online and then folks from the audience. It was very interesting, and I think as a director sitting there, not only listening to the candidates and just learning more about them, there were a lot of questions brought up that prompted my thinking about being a director and things that I haven't really given consideration to that I think maybe I should be, or mentioning to fellow directors or something, opportunities to talk about a couple different topics that were top of mind with the community that we haven't really addressed. So more follow-up on that later, I'm sure. And then I also just want to give a shout out and some words of gratitude to the school counselors at the high schools and the teachers and the staff who are all supporting the application process for college right now. Having a senior this year, it's unbelievable what these teachers and counselors go through to help and support each student. Things like letters of recommendations, a lot of smaller schools require them. They require 2, and so every student applying to 2 schools needs 2 letters of recommendations, and they're asking teachers to do that. Probably not in their contract. We have counselors meeting individually with students to get to know them better because they have to write a recommendation to some of these colleges. And then we have success coordinators and a whole lot of people helping support students and families understand the FAFSA process, which is not really straightforward. And I think about myself and the fact that I'm tied into the system. I know where to go to ask for help, and it's still challenging for me to get through this whole process. So I can only imagine what it's like for other families and families who perhaps their English isn't their first language. So I just really appreciate what our staff does to support that effort. And then I'm looking forward to tomorrow night. I'm going to drop by the Everett High School and Beyond night. I always enjoy that opportunity to sort of see who's there and what information they're sharing with our students. And then the following night, the Snohomish County Public Officials Reception. I don't know if any of my fellow directors are going, but I really think that we as directors can maybe, and that was one of the things that came from the meeting last night actually, was do a better job of connecting with more of the public officials within our district. I know some of the staff spends time doing that, but I feel like maybe as directors we don't spend enough time building those relationships and helping them understand what education in our district looks like. And then finally, I got my flu shot yesterday, and it did hurt. I'm sorry. It was a big pinch, but I went right after my 90-year-old mother-in-law, and she wasn't fazed by it, so I had to have a really straight face and say that it didn't hurt at all. So anyhow, thank you for the reminder, and I hope everyone else gets one too.
Thank you. I have not gotten my flu shot. I'm going to need a little arm
Moment of
twisting
truth.
to get it because they do hurt. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I hate shots.
Yeah. I also attended the candidates forum last night and came away with some notes on my smartphone as to topics that were brought up that were interesting thoughts. It was great to hear Director Nankar be able to share some of the positive things about our district, and I did congratulate him on he's shaking his head. He did a wonderful job. It's tough. It is really tough to sit up there and have those questions fired at you. So I'm going for an iReady session tomorrow, so I will be able to report on that next board meeting, but very much looking forward to it. And other than that, just hearing about your visit to the Ledge conference reminded me of an event this weekend. I was east of the mountains and was driving to a trailhead to go for a bike ride, and we drove through this little town called Thorpe, and there was a one-room schoolhouse there, and we drove by there, and I just thought, there's 295 or 96 school districts in the state. This is one of them. Tiny. It's like, what are their issues? What issues do we have that are similar that we have to deal with as directors versus how different can theirs be? You know, you hear local control, and it has real meaning when you drive through a small community like that. I see they have 51 students, so it would be a very different sort of governing job. But you think of some of the laws that are passed and how they affect us and how they would affect them so differently. So the Ledge Conference can be a very useful tool in helping set priorities. I'm wondering what priority, however, the simple majority on levies, where that fell, not levies, bonds, excuse me.
It didn't rise to that. It was on our list. It wasn't on the WASDA group list.
Really?
That got emailed out.
That's not
Yeah.
good to hear.
And they've changed the wording to simple majority on all school measures is how it's worded now. And so, but it didn't rise to the top. Doesn't mean it can't be ours and it's not WASA's, but it was really fully funding SEB issues, social emotional stuff, just different priorities.
Okay.
Many priorities.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. We will move on to audience comments, section 8. Are there any public comments this evening?
None at this time.
Thank you. We'll move on to section 9, consent agenda. Dr. Salzman, do you
Thank
please
you.
provide an introduction?
Yes, ma'am. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts and grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office has received no questions or comments regarding these items. Therefore, the consent agenda is presented as published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Director Mitchell and seconded by Director Sane to approve the consent agenda. Does any director wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section? Hearing no requests, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to section 10.0, strategic progress monitoring, with our annual student achievement report. Dr. Matthews. She will give us an update on our student achievement and a review of state assessments.
Good evening. All right, tonight I'm going to go over the 2019 Annual Student Achievement Report. Be talking about the elements of the state assessment program, we'll share the state assessment results, also examine both the comparative and absolute perspectives of this data, both of which have merit. We'll talk about the trend data and gap data, and most importantly, about how you close the gap. So as I did last year, this is just a summary of what I'm going to tell you because it's a lot of data. You have an extended version, by the way, of the slides in DocuShare. In summary, we outperformed the state in every grade level and on every test, and that's a comparative measure. In addition, we performed in the top third and higher than our free and reduced lunch rate ranking predicts in every grade level except grade 10 math and grade 11 WCAS when looking at the comparable districts as well as the 25 largest districts. Performed in the top third and higher than our free and reduced lunch rate ranking in ELA grades 4, 6, 7, and 8, and math in 5 and 8 against local districts. And while we had modest increase in proficiency both in ELA and math, we're essentially flat and saw declining performance in science. We are seeing some persistent gaps in proficiency in ELA and math and science for our transitional bilingual students, our students with disabilities, our low-income students, and then our Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, Black and African American, and Hispanic or Latino students. And while we saw increases in mean scores in the SBA index, which I'm going to go over in those same groups, we are seeing some decreasing gaps and some, frankly, some increasing gaps as well. And then a new look at the data, we'll look at ethnicity and gender as well as ethnicity and socioeconomic status for African American and Black population as well as our Hispanic and Latino population. So as far as the assessment program goes, little changes from 2018. So we test in ELA in the Smarter Balanced Assessment, in ELA and math in grades 3 through 8 and 10. The Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science was new last year and continued this year. Really, the only change is a change in our graduation requirements around assessment, where Smarter Balance is now just one of the pathways rather than the one of the actual or the specific requirement. So as I said, we outperformed the state in every grade level and content area with double-digit improvements over the state in 15 out of, or 12 out of our 17 tested areas. And when we compare ourselves to the 7 local districts and the 25 largest districts in our comparative districts, we see some positive performance indicators. And you've seen this report before. I'm going to narrow it down because it's very large and numerous pages. So just a reminder that we rank our districts in ascending free and reduced lunch rate and descending proficiency, comparing our school districts against the 7 local districts, the 25 largest in the state, and then comparable districts based on enrollment and free and reduced lunch. And our goal is to be ranked higher in our proficiency than in our free and reduced lunch rate. And this allows us to compare ourselves, but it also allows us to identify schools that might have a higher free and reduced lunch rate. They're outperforming us so that we can find programs to improve our performance. We are 5th by free and reduced lunch rate against our 7 local districts. We are 9th against the 25 largest in the state and 11th against the comparable districts by enrollment and free and reduced lunch rate. When we look at our performance, our proficiency rates against these districts, you'll notice for 25 largest school districts and our comparable school districts, we are both in the top third of schools, and we also outperform our proficiency ranking. Not so against the 7 local districts. While that's true about for grades 4, 7, 8, and 6, for grades 3, 5, and 10, We outperform our proficiency outperforms our free and reduced lunch ranking, but we are not in the top third of those schools. And when we look at our math performance, what we find in elementary and middle school against the 25 largest school districts as well as the comparable school districts, we're both in the top third and we outperform our proficiency ranking. However, against our 7 local school districts in third, fourth, sixth, and seventh, we outperform our proficiency. Our proficiency outperforms our free and reduced lunch ranking, but we are not in the top third. That's true for third, fourth, sixth, and seventh. And in 10th grade, regardless of our comparison groups, we are neither in the top third nor are we outperforming our proficiency ranking, so that's a concern. This is our comparison for WACAS, which we added this year in our second year of the test. And you can see against the 25 largest school districts, we're in the top third and we are outperforming our proficiency ranking. Against the 7 local districts, in 5th and 10th, we are outperforming our proficiency ranking, but we are not in the top third. And in 10th grade against the comparable school districts, we are neither in the top third nor outperforming our proficiency ranking. All right, so looking at our assessment performance over time, and I'm going to look at 5th, 8th, and 10th, or excuse me, 5th, 8th, and high school. So 10th for ELA and math, and then 11th for the WACAS. I'm looking at these grades because they provide all 3 tests, a view of those. And frankly, they're indicative of our performance overall. I would say with the exception of 3rd and 4th grade ELA, where we saw an increase of about 7% over 5 years. So this is 5th grade, and you can see we have a fairly flat performance over the course of the past 5 years. Modest increase in math from 56.1 to 61.5, and then a decline in our science scores, noting that in 18 and in 19, 2018 and 19, that is a different test. So the MSP for 2015, 16, and 17, and then the test changed. But we saw that decline prior to the test changing. In grade 8, again, flat in ELA. That was true at 6th and 7th grade as well, and flat essentially in math. And then again, that same decline, although you would note that modest increase from 18 to 19 of about 2.5%. In high school, and just a reminder that high school for math has been a challenge. In ELA, if we look at all 5 years, though we did have an increase in 2017, overall the trend line is pretty flat for high school as well. And while we saw increases in math, the performance was very low. Now, math is the subject for which the graduation exam and the accountability were separated for a few years. And so just a reminder that in 18 and 19, that's when that realigned to the same grade level, the same test for the first time. And you can see that performance change in the state as well. And then at high school, you see in 18 and 19, when the WACAS came into play, a decline in performance there, both at the state and the district level. So this next view is a view of the percentage of students in levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 is in blue. Red is our level 1 students. The elementary schools are ranked from lowest to highest in free and reduced lunch rate. And the trend that we are seeing is a decline in the percentage of students in level 4, an increase in the students in level 3, in level 1, with the exception, for example, of Garfield, which has a higher percentage of level 4 than we would expect and a lower percentage of level 1. So that's a school we certainly want to learn from. Same is true in math, with a little bit more variation than in English, and you can see Garfield and Lowell both coming in with a low percentage of students in level 1 and a slightly higher in level 4 than schools of their similar free and reduced lunch rate. This is the science performance, and again, we see the same pattern with Garfield, again having a smaller percentage of students in level 1 and more in level 4 than the schools are surrounding it. In grade 8, you see the same pattern. However, in ELA, we saw that North Middle School had a smaller percentage of students in level 1 last year in ELA in grade 8. And though not a larger percentage of students in level 4, a larger percentage than Evergreen in level 3, and a larger percent in level 4 than Eisenhower, both of which had less percent of students in free and reduced lunch. In math, a pretty predictable pattern of decreasing level 4, increasing level 1. No real outliers there. And then the same is true in WACUS, although as Eisenhower, Evergreen, and North had similar performance. Here's our grade 10 ELA. And you can see Cascade and Everett High are very similar schools, and you can see that Everett High has slightly more students in level 1. And in math, a little bit of a shift there, as you can see, toward the level 1 and 2. So more students in level 1 and 2 than for ELA. And then finally in science. And in science, you see Everett High is sort of an outlier there, with more students in level 4 and less students in level 1 than we might expect. So there's two ways that we're going to look at the gap, and the first is by proficiency, so percent of students meeting standard relative to the all and relative to their peers. So this is grade 5, and the dotted line represents the percentage of students in the all category meeting standard. You can see that for students with disabilities, transitional, bilingual, African American or Black, and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students, all of those groups had significantly lower percentages of students at standard, and none really reaching that 50% mark. And I included African American and Black in that group, although they reached into the 64 percentile because they took a dip last year. Our low-income and Hispanic students broke that 50% mark. Low-income rising over the course of the last 3 years, as well as our Hispanic students. In grade 8, a similar pattern, however, instead of seeing that positive growth in our Hispanic population, we saw it in our African American population, jumping from 49.2 to 65.0. At high school, a similar pattern, although our low-income students are pretty flat there. And our African-American students, though, had a jump from 48 to 60. It has really been sort of a roller coaster with them at the high school level. So dropping and gaining about 10% each year. And then our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, though a small group, declining in that year. For math, we see a little bit larger gaps, and so for all of these groups, low-income students with disabilities, transitional, bilingual, are Black or African American, Hispanic and Latino, and Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, all really falling into an area of a pretty significant gap that is persisting. And we saw that same trend at grade 8 as well. And just to note, the African American or Black population at grade 8 growing 20% over 5 years, so that's a very positive move, but not quite making that 50% mark. And then here's our math, and this reflects the lower performance in math that you saw on the trend line. So the gaps may seem a little bit smaller, and that's only because the all is significantly lower. Same groups that we're seeing with those greater gaps. And then finally, science. And for science, you're really just seeing 2 years because the WACAS just came into play, and it is so substantially different than the end of course exam on biology. So here we're seeing gaps with the same groups of students. And the gap seems pretty flat at this point, but it's only a 2-year mark. That's in grade 5. Similar in grade 8, although you'll notice for African American and Black students a 7% increase in a year. And then at high school, so seeing the students with disabilities going up 10%, but still very low. Black or African American students, they had a population too small to report last year at the high school level. And then our Hispanic students actually declining. So proficiency, as I said last year, is one way to look at the gap, but it really doesn't tell us how close the students who are not meeting standard are to actually meeting standard, and that's really how you close the gap, is to figure that out. And so I just want to remind you of a construct that we talked about last year around closing the gap. So when we think about the Smarter Balanced Assessment and what it takes to meet standard and then stay at standard from one year to the next, the number of scale score points that a student has to make is very modest. 41 points between grade 3 and 4, 29 between 4 and 5, and so on. So the challenge is not for our students who are at standard, but the ones who are behind standard when they come to us. And if we take a student, such as this one in low level 1 at 2319, if that student just made the number of points required to stay at standard, that student would not be at the 4th grade standard by 8th grade, okay? And so we really have to think about it in terms of how much growth is necessary for a student in level 1 to reach level 3 in 2 years, or level 2 to meet level 3 in 1 year. And when we think about that and look at actual data, it's really about 2 to 2.5 times what the average student at standard would have to meet. All right, so going from this idea of just proficiency, met standard or not meeting standard, to this idea of looking at students by where they fall in their level by their scale score, we convert each scale score to an index score. So this student is a 2467, which is 17% into level 2, and so they get a 2.17. And this is a real student, by the way. Reaching 2532 the next year puts that student 76% of the way into level 2, so closer to meeting standard, even though the student is not. And then finally reaching 2593 the next year at 3.39, meaning 39% into level 3. All right, so we can do that for our different groups of students, each of our demographics. And this is ELA, and there's good news here. So for our students, our Hispanic and Latino students, though meaning proficiency at a much lower level, last year in every single grade level, they were in level 3. Their mean scores hit level 3. For our Black and African American students, in 6 out of 7 grade levels, they met that level 3 standard. However, in grade 5 for our Black and Hispanic students, and in all grades for our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students, they were in level 2. So that's a concern because their mean is not meeting standard. When we compare their performance in terms of closing the gap between their performance and the performance of the all students, we see that the gap declined, which is a good thing. That's why it's in green. Normally our arrows are upward when they're green. So for Black and African American students in grades 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, Hispanic students in 4 and 5, and our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders in 4 and 5, all those gaps decreased. However, for the remaining grade levels for our Hispanic students, the gaps were essentially flat, so no real change. And the same was true in grades 6 and 7 for our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students. And then we saw increasing gaps in 4 cases. When we look at the index for math, less good news, frankly, and that is that we only saw that level 3 mean score for grades 3 and 4 for Black and African American students or Hispanic and Latino students. The remaining were in level 2, so not meeting standard as a group. And looking at the gap closing, while we had more gaps closing, we still do have some flat gaps, and we have some gaps that are increasing, in particular for our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students. Looking at the data by program for our students with disabilities, transitional bilingual, and our low-income students, we see that all of our grade levels for low-income students hit that level 3, which is very positive. However, not so for our students with disabilities and transitional bilingual students. And when we look at it for math students, only grades 3 and 4 for our low-income students, and all remaining groups hitting that level 2. I want to just say at this point, and this is a disclaimer I give staffs when I talk about data, it's really important to remember that we disaggregate data so we can better understand what's happening and respond to those, that data in a way that's appropriate and changes the outcomes. It is not in any way a rationalization of the data. So belonging to a group is not in any way rationalization for low data, frankly. We are in the business of defeating the predictability of failure, and we do it all the time. And so when we look at these scores, it really should be a rallying cry for the work that we need to do. So this is a new look at the data, and this is a disaggregation of the data by both gender and ethnicity, and we looked at African American and Black and Hispanic and Latino students. We did not look at American Indian, Alaska Native, or Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian students because those groups are so small. When you cut them 4 ways, then you can't report them. They're too small. So, but this is, I think this is an important way to look at it. Again, it's the SBA index, so we're looking at that. Level 3 is a 3.0, and the bigger the number, the higher you're going. So when we look at African American and Black students by gender, with females in orange and males in blue, we see that for grades 3, 4, 6, and 7, both groups hit that level 3 mean score. However, for grades 8 and 10, only female students did, and in grade 5, neither did. When we look at the same information by socioeconomic status, the gap is bigger for ELA. And you can see only in grades 4 and 10 did those groups, both males and, low-income and non-low-income students, meet that 3.0 standard. In the remaining grade levels, the low-income students hit that 2, but not meeting standard at 3. When we look at math for Black or African American students by gender, you see again in grades 3 and 4, both groups reaching that level 3, but none of the other grade levels reaching level 3, and in fact, a declining score over time from grade 3 to grade 10 that is concerning. When we look at African American or Black students by socioeconomic status, we see that for all grade levels except grade 10, low-income students fell in that level 2, non-low-income students in level 3, grade 10 both in level 2, and again, declining performance over time. For our Hispanic or Latino students by gender, see a similar pattern to that of our African American or Black students, with grades 4, 5, 8, and 10 all falling in that level 3 despite, regardless of gender. In grades 3, 6, and 8, female students hitting level 3, and male students only in level 2. And then by socioeconomic status for ELA, we see a greater gap. In grade 10, we do see both groups hitting the level 3 standard, but none of the other grade levels. So our low-income students hitting only the level 2, and our non-low-income students in level 3. And then SBA index by gender for our Latino Hispanic students, only grade 4, both groups being in level 2. In grade 3, our male students are in level 3, our female students are in level 2, and all the remaining grade levels, the mean score falls into level 2, and it's a declining score over time. And then finally, by socioeconomic status, we see that low-income students all fell in level 2, non-low-income students all falling in level 3, and then a declining performance over time. So, just to review the summary, so comparatively, we outperformed the state in every grade level and test. Depending on our performance against local 7 groups, our local 7 school districts, comparable districts are the 25 largest. We outperformed our proficiency rating, outperformed our free and reduced lunch ranking. In many cases, however, there are some areas for improvement, particularly in math, with modest increases but generally flat in performance, math lagging, ELA, and then persistent gaps, no matter how you slice it, with some of our more fragile academic populations. And I can't tell if I went over or not because there's 4 minutes left on the clock. So any questions for me?
Thank you, Catherine. I often feel like we need this presentation 1 week, 2 weeks to digest it and understand it, and then have a question session 2 weeks later. It's really interesting data, but there's a lot to it. And it's more meaningful after I've heard your explanations. But with that, do directors have questions, directors or student representatives? Questions?
A quick question on that.
Director Mason?
Can you remind me on the high school math, was that data, I mean, I'm not remembering, but I recall that there were so many changes in the timing of the test taking and things like that, I sort of blipped over the 10th grade numbers this year
Yes.
because I didn't feel like they were valid.
Well, I wouldn't say they're not valid because I think, it's the performance of our students and we need we definitely need to increase from 42%.
Right.
So in 2016, they changed the rule and moved accountability to 11th grade and the graduation exam to 10th grade. And so kids took the test in 10th grade, but then maybe didn't take it again in 11th grade for the accountability, because accountability doesn't really matter to the students, right? They care about graduation. So we had fewer students show up for the 11th grade test, and that resulted in lower performance. But in 18 and 19, those represent the years when the test was the same test for accountability as for graduation, and it was in the same year.
So last year's the first year it was in the same year. This past,
No, 17, 18 was the first time that it was back to being both in 10th grade.
both in 10th grade.
Both graduation and accountability. Now,
So for 2 years we've had that, 2 test cycles.
right.
Okay.
Right before the test, remember though, there was lots of swirl about whether or not the test was going to be a graduation requirement moving into the test last spring.
And so what was our turnout at 10th grade on the SBA?
Our turnout, I don't want to be quoted.
Sorry,
I have
that's
to
okay.
look, but for 10th grade, it was very high.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
it's the 11th grade science test had a lower turnout, but 10th grade, the turnout was
because
very high.
lots of students had already met graduation requirement.
And they dropped the graduation requirement
Right.
for
Okay.
science.
Wasn't
Okay,
required.
thank you for the
Yeah.
recap.
Yeah,
Seems to change every year.
it has been confusing.
If I may, I do really appreciate this presentation. And as we've spoken a lot about iReady and the other things, because we are very proud of our high school graduation rates, but we do hear comments from community employers, colleges about what's in that diploma. And I think this does give us some areas for opportunity and concern of what really is in that diploma. And the fact that having new leadership here, new eyes, new opportunities, I think this is valuable information for us to take a hard look at where we really sit with our students and who are we serving and where are our gaps, and this is important information. And I think we have a lot of work. So thank you.
Director Lucy?
Thank you very much, Catherine. I really appreciate your your presentations when you have them, because you're right. We're looking at the data. We're looking at what it tells us, and hopefully it's not suggesting that there's problem areas per se, because we look at our other data that says we're doing better than what the state is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at that, and the state is at 50%, there's another 50% of students out there that aren't making it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're above that 50%, say at 70%, what about the 30%?
Right.
And we have to look at that.
Right.
And we need to start looking at what can we do for the least of the kids that can't make it. Because my thoughts are those highly capable and the kids that are out there that are doing extremely well will continue to do extremely well. But what we have to do is we need to bring all of our students up so that they can all do extremely well. And I like the fact that, you presented it in this fashion in which we see the areas that are declining. The years are, over the years we see a declining situation. We need to look at that and find out, yes, we know when the tests change, and we know that with any new test, you have 2 or 3 years of a blip in the data and what it shows. But we need to find out what is it that we're doing for our kids over the long run, from first grade all the way up to 12th grade. What's happening when we can see that Johnny comes in, he's doing really well, but yet then in the 4th grade or in the next grade up, Johnny's not doing so well. And then Janie, she fell off the map. What's going on? I don't care if she's doing better than the state. What happened? How can we keep Janie going and Johnny going so that once they graduate, they become the doctors, lawyers, and whatever that's going to take care of us as we get older? So, we've got to look at that. And we have to also look at what's best for them so that they could be successful. They could be the astronauts and the physicists that are out there. So it's good to see that. I am very concerned about when you break it down into the ethnic groups and the socioeconomic groups and the differences that you see there. We were doing well in that. It showed areas where we were doing well, but yet then we've had a decline over the years. We need to get back to where we were doing, what we were doing, and how we were focusing in on what the needs are of every student. So if this opens our eyes, that's an important thing. That's the important thing. If this opens our eyes and gives us different opportunities to look for different resources and tools to place in our box to help each kid, that's great. But I'd like to find out why over the long-term runs we were seeing a decline, such a large decline. It'd be interesting to find out what was that. I don't know how you can measure that or how you can, assess that, but it would be interesting to find out why the decline.
Student representatives, do you have comments?
Thank you for your presentation. It's interesting to see as a student where our test scores go and how they're analyzed. I had a question it was on one of the beginning slides, but it talked about how the SBA or the state tests are only one of the 7 graduation pathway options. What are the other 6?
The other 6 are dual credit coursework, so taking a dual credit class in appropriate content area, ELA and math, CTE, CTE pathway, SAT, ACT, ASVAB, advanced coursework, so AP courses. I feel like I'm missing one. I did say ASVAB. Yeah. So there's a variety of them, and they have to be aligned to a student's high school and beyond plan now.
Okay. And then as Director Lissane mentioned, I was interested in some of the causes that your team may have thought about why math and science were increasing in level 1 and decreasing in level 4 throughout 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. Have there been any?
There's a lot of discussions, so it's a greater team, I think, has to grapple with that. So I don't know if any of the teaching and learning want to jump in.
We've been talking a lot about just the fidelity of implementation of that marriage between curriculum, assessment, instruction, and interventions, and particularly interventions. We're not seeing the results that we want to see with kids that are scoring at level 1, and it seems to persist. So that graphic that Dr. Matthews showed about the gingerbread cookie needing to accelerate, we just need to accelerate learning, and that's easier said than done for the kids who persist at levels 1 and 2. So we really need to hone in on those strategies to do so at all grade levels.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, like just as a student, I wasn't aware of any of this data, and I feel like as a student, I would like for like this kind of data to be shared, because just looking at the slide, I was like, wow, I think that our district can do better. And like just the requirement thing that happened in like last spring, like there was chatter about that at school. People were talking about it, and like as the data shows that there wasn't a lot of students taking the test because they truly did believe that it wasn't a requirement no more. So, and also just like what Ms. Lassane said, like providing resources for those ethnic groups that weren't scoring as high as they should be, or like aren't taking the test as seriously as they should be, like the resources and the tools, and just providing them with like information about how to like pass the test.
Yeah, so, and just to let you know, the Assessment and Research website, we put a huge amount of data out on the website for you to see. So we would encourage you to check it out. This will be up there tomorrow.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, so with the achievement, the fluctuations in the sort of achievement gaps, that can really be skewed by the size of the population.
That is
correct?
true.
Yeah. So, so the results could look really different if, based on the size of the group.
Right,
Right.
yeah, that's true.
And I'm not looking for excuses here, but when I look at, say, slide 22, the high school SBA and science scores, and when you see, you know, less than 50% of students meeting standard in math, and then the plummet in the science scores, it's like, does anyone ever question the test? And I guess my question might be, if we have less than 50% of students passing the test, do they still have some basic level of competency that the test is just kind of masking in some ways because they're competent but not maybe worthy, or maybe the test is so difficult that those competences are not seen or
Yes.
measured properly? It's
So
just
this-
alarming to me to see these low numbers, and obviously they're statewide, they're district-wide,
Right.
and they're not getting any better.
Right. So ELA, Smarter Balanced in ELA and math is a national test, and it's aligned to the Common Core.
Right.
And so, as Dr. Scott said, one of the keys is making sure our instruction is aligned to the standards, which is the Common Core, and that we're testing what we're teaching, right? And so the test is aligned to the Common Core.
Right.
And we have maps that are aligned to the Common Core, instructional maps. Math, the test, when the state moved it from 11th to 10th grade, they removed all the Algebra 2 components. So they actually changed it 2 years ago because they moved it from 11th to 10th grade, and so a student entering high school at algebra should be able to pass it because it only goes as far as geometry. The WACAS is a substantially different test than the end of course exam in biology. And just because well, first of all, it's based on different standards than the next generation science standards. So I think certainly we're seeing the result of that shift in standards as we did whenever we've had that change in standards.
Right. And as I said, I'm not looking for excuses, but I think you do have to acknowledge that things have changed. And
Yes.
And so I guess I believe our students are still learning. And because I know we've got great teachers and great staff and everything else.
I got one
and
in college.
Sometimes the test scores just might mask that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I guess another interesting comparison could be to say what, and maybe this isn't possible, but nationally, districts that have adopted the Common Core, how are their students doing on these tests?
I would have to look and see if there's a national release of Smarter Balanced. It's not used in every state. So
Right.
there's the Park test, the Smarter Balanced, and then some states use their own test. But I'd have to look.
Which was kind of the goal from the beginning, I recall, was just to have a consistent standards and test assessment nationwide, and that didn't quite happen. Yeah.
Local control.
Yeah, local control. Are there any other? Okay,
I have one
Director
other comment to make, and I just, it's interesting because it's so easy when we look at data like this to focus on where the successes aren't happening and the students that are being left behind. And, we've made a commitment to help every single student achieve to their highest level. And I also want to remind directors that those are our high-performing students too, and they need to have curriculum and instruction that helps them exceed at their highest level. And I don't want to think that because they scored a 3 or 4 on the Smarter Balance that they're going to be fine. I want to see national merit scholars out of every high school. And so I want to continue to focus on the whole spectrum of student accountability and curriculum and instruction and stuff, and just kind of throw that out there as a reminder.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
It is, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Look forward to next year. Information discussion, there are no items on tonight's agenda, so we'll move to section 12, unfinished business, which is the approval of resolution 1216, unlimited tax general obligation bonds. Mr. Gunn?
Thank you. So tonight is the culmination of conversations that began in February of 2018 when the capital bond failed at that time. We have discussed this numerous times with you, and in fact, most recently at the last board meeting in quite a bit of detail, as well as at the August workshop for about a day and a quarter of it, something like that. So tonight I'm going to cover the information in fairly brief form. We have also, I think, 2 and maybe 3 members of the Capital Bond Planning Committee here to make comments again. And then we will open it up for discussion. And ultimately, what we're asking for tonight, our objective, is that I am presenting on behalf of the superintendent a recommendation to you to approve Resolution 1216, which is to place a capital bond on the April 2020 special election ballot for $317.4 million. The summer workshop a year ago, one of the results of that was that you directed the superintendent to form a capital bond planning committee and to have that committee recommend to the superintendent and then superintendent bring to you a recommendation. The resolution that you're asked to consider approving tonight is based on that recommendation of the Capital Bond Planning Committee. There is only one minor change, and that is because the committee recommended a project to replace a roof that is already being done as part of the Woodside modernization project. Other than that, it's identical to what the committee recommended. The message is contained in the committee's recommendation up there on the screen, the 6 bullets, the final ones. Something for everyone across the district. High school boundary changes provide temporary relief. That's a way to explain the committee's thinking about why they're not including a new high school in the recommendation. A new high school, as you know, has been one of the largest projects on the last 3 bonds that we have asked for a voter approval on and failed. So the committee is not recommending a new high school, and it's in large part because in the committee's mind, the boundary changes give us some breathing room, 5 to 10 years, before we absolutely have to have that high school. There was another committee formed based on last summer's board workshop, the High School Boundary Committee. The work that they produced and that you approved actually helped to relieve, for a while, 5 to 10 years, the growth, the overcrowding at Jackson High School. The next bullet, elementary additions rather than new schools. That's a way to explain that instead of proposing a new elementary school, there are elementary school additions, part of the bond. There are 36 new elementary school classrooms. One of the things that I've sent to you in a Friday report last week explains that the 3 elementary school replacements that we're proposing on the bond also include new elementary school space, a total of 22 classrooms in those 3 schools. And what we're doing as part of the replacement is we're bringing those schools up to, or nearly up to, the current optimum size that the board has set as an elementary school size in its capital facilities plan. So 2 of the schools we're bringing them up to 600 capacity, and one of those up to 550. And the one up to 550 is because it's a smaller site. It's Jackson High School. Jackson Elementary School. Sorry about that. The next bullet, facilities for STEM and career pathways. That statement provides the explanation for, I think, 4 or 5 of the projects on this bond recommendation at all 3 high schools. The next bullet, replace or repair aging schools and building systems. So in this, in addition to the replacement of 3 elementary schools, we have roofing projects, flooring projects, and HVAC upgrade projects, as well as a variety of other things, technology and site improvements and some other ones. The last bullet, do not go for the maximum bond size. That is a statement that explains that the committee was told it could develop a bond proposal up to $400 million and maybe even a little bit more, and still the district would be able to achieve that with a stable tax rate well into the future. This recommendation is substantially lower than the maximum they were told they could go for that with that stable tax rate. So their statement was, do not go for the maximum. The recommendation is for $317.4 million, not the $400 million that they could have proposed. I'll just briefly, there are 3 slides now that have a list of all of the projects. You've seen and heard about these many times. So I won't go over them in detail. So once again, though, 36 new elementary schools at 8 elementary classrooms at 8 schools, replacing 3 elementary schools instead of modernizing them because they needed to be modernized. Upgrade and modernize STEM facilities at various buildings at our 3 high schools. Upgrade building systems, HVAC, roofing, and flooring, and improve safety and security projects. There are quite a few of those. We took special effort planning for this committee process to really look carefully at what we could be and should be doing for safety and security as part of the conversation. And then to improve some of our sites, we have 3 projects listed there, and then also technology systems and infrastructure. So once again, a bond proposal of $317.4 million. The career pathways are 3 high schools: aerospace and advanced manufacturing, medical and health careers, information and communications technology. We presented information to you at many occasions. One of the questions, though, that came up at the last meeting that we are providing information to you tonight, and I'm going to cover briefly, and if you have questions, I'd like you to, at the end of the presentation, ask those questions about this, and we'll have somebody, I think Dana Riley Black, stand up and answer those. But the the Career Pathway Program will be designed as a 3-credit course, similar to a Skill Center satellite program with AM and PM options. So the AM option will be designed for the students that are at the home high school. The PM option will be offered for those schools from other schools to attend. So the transportation necessary will be provided for the afternoon cohort of that group. And at this time, we're planning to accommodate 50 students or 2 classes of students at each of our high schools. That's a very high-level explanation, a 1-slide description. And again, I would appreciate it if maybe you could hold questions on that until the question and discussion period at the end. Next steps, October 15th, there's a board study session on community engagement and communications plan. That is assuming that you approve the resolution tonight. As I guess all of these next steps are actually assuming that you approve the resolution tonight. That would mean that from October until April, there would be about a 5 or 6 month period of community outreach on the bond proposal. And then April 9th is when ballots would be mailed out, and election day would be on April 28th. So with that, we've signed up 3 committee members. I'm going to ask them one by one to come up, and I saw 2 of them before I started. Hopefully the 3rd one has shown up. So let's start with Christine Vo, please. If you could come up. And I have described tonight's presentation on the part of the committee members as having 2 or 3 minutes to explain to you what the committee's thinking was as they came up with their presentation, their recommendation. Christine?
Good evening. Thank you, Mike, for the introduction, and also thank you to Mike for inviting me to come speak to the school board today. He had asked me to share a little bit of the process and the thinking that was behind our work last year. Last year, I had the opportunity to serve on the Capital Bond Planning Committee, and it was made of many community members, as some staff from our school district. And I can tell you that there were some difficult decisions that we really grappled with throughout the entire school year. We had a meeting every month, and at each meeting, some of the questions that came up to guide our work were, how do we ensure that there is equitable distribution for the projects? How can we ensure that the South End schools, the Central schools, the North End schools get a bit of something, some type of support for our students? The other question that guided our work was, how do we ensure that we prioritize the projects? And safety was number 1 on our list. We looked at the projects that were going to support schools with security systems, with roofing. We also looked at projects that were going to provide social emotional supports to our students, such as developing a new playground, schools that needed to be remodernized because of safety concerns for special education students having to leave the building in case of an emergency. And so we really thought deeply about these questions, and we really put forth a lot of thought into making sure that it was really equitable, and into making sure that we could continue to gain our voter support for future bonds. We also thought about the longevity of future bonds, and we grappled with the decision with building a new high school versus elementary schools or other projects. And in the past, since the high school project was not passed and it was on the pass bond, we wanted to really make sure that we gained voter support and longevity for anything else that our district proposes in the future. And that was a lot of the reasoning and the conversations that came up in many of the meetings that I attended. And the meetings were very well organized, so we had lots of materials and resources to make decisions that I feel were not emotion-driven decisions, but decisions that were really hopefully in the best interest to move our district forward. Are there any questions?
No questions. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank
Great
you.
perspective.
All right, Sean Monahan, please.
Thank you. I think Christine said it really well. When I started this process, I'm at Jackson High School. So I thought, boy, we need another high school because we're overcrowded. And so I came in with that mindset that that's something I really wanted the committee to propose. But over time, as we looked at all the different projects that needed to be completed, and we found out that one of the elementary schools was built on maybe would have trouble in an earthquake, that it could collapse. That really impacted us, saying, well, the safety of the kids has to come first. We have to do safety first. And then a group of people from the committee also went on a bus and viewed these other elementary schools. And they came back and they talked with us, and they just said, this is the high priority. All right, these schools, we need to maintain the infrastructure that we have, and these schools are in great need. And so through a lot of discussions, and as Christine said, we kind of shifted. We shifted towards let's make sure safety first. Let's get those elementaries back up to where they should be before we try to meet the growth needs. And I'll also tell you that it helped that the other committee was able to move boundaries in a way that would allow Jackson High School not to grow so fast, so quickly, that we had maybe 5 to 8 or 10 years to be able to now solve this problem. And so with those things all said, the whole committee really came together. Most of the votes for almost all the projects were like 22 of the group. So it was almost unanimous. There was only one of the projects that kind of split half and half, and that was the other elementary project. And I think the concern being there is we wanted to make sure, as Christine said, that every part of our district had some skin in the game, right? Something that would draw them in and have them vote yes. And so we felt at the end we just didn't have that unanimous decision about the elementary school as we did in the others. Any questions? Okay.
No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jennifer Willows, please. She's not here. So we have come to the completion of the presentation. Again, I would like to put it on the table for consideration and approval, the resolution number 1216 for a capital bond proposal in the amount of $317.4 million on the April 28th, 2020 special election ballot. And now I am available, as are others, if you have any questions or comments.
I have a question. Director Mason, question?
Thank you. I have just a small detail question regarding Woodside Elementary. If this proposal were to pass tonight, and if we were to be successful, would the timing be such that the additional classrooms at Woodside would be a part of the current project?
Yes.
Thank you. I also have a question regarding the pathway programs, which I so appreciate you providing a framework and outline as to how the scheduling might work. A couple questions that have come up. One is, so it's my understanding, my very limited understanding, that the program at Cascade is really a program you enter into and stay into, whereas, for example, medical pathways program, there might be, or maybe this is not the case, but there might be classes that students might want to take, like for a CTE credit, versus actually being a part of the program. Would that be an option if there were spaces available in those classes?
We're working to develop each of these pathways to include both exploratory as well as preparatory opportunities.
Those were the words I was looking for.
Right, and those are the formal CTE terms. And this allows students to have both on-ramps and off-ramps in each of the pathways. So for the manufacturing program that's already started, albeit it's very new in its start, we have exploratory programs, exploratory courses that are starting as early as middle school with our CAD design courses and some of the manufacturing work that's going on at the middle school level, and then on into high school with our engineering courses, our robotics courses that we're shifting to also include mechatronics, so that if a student becomes really interested in manufacturing, then he or she can join the 3-credit manufacturing course at Cascade High School. It could be that turns into also a 2-year program, but right now it's a 1-year program that you end with industry recognized accreditation or certificate. The same is what we're hoping to build for the medical pathways as well as the information and communication technology. So that would be parallel in the programs across the district. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. That's excellent. And then just to follow up on that a little bit, the number of students, the 50, I understand that at this point we don't have a clear understanding of which programs are going to be very desirable to students across the district, which ones will be filled with just home students or homeschool students there. Is there capacity to grow? Well, two questions. One, it's my understanding that the pathways programs as they're defined today are going to be primarily for juniors and seniors after they've completed some of the requirements. Is that not requirements to get in? That might be the wrong word.
You're helping me think about this a little bit more deeply. We can start a career pathway, again, as early as middle school. What we would be the site-specific programs would be those portion of the programs that are skill center or skill center-like. So when a student would have to have the facility to engage in the curriculum, such as the manufacturing work that's currently going on at Cascade High School. So a student can start a pathway earlier on and explore it. And then the limitations start to happen when the students become part of that preparatory version of the course, because the facility starts to become, you can only make it so big. And so we're estimating that 2 classes, and CTE classes run at about 24, 25, 2 classes of CTE students at a given time would be appropriate for the facilities, and also with our staff that can support those programs. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and would that be primarily upperclassmen?
So typically those offerings for preparatory courses are typically for upperclassmen, but the manufacturing course right now, we've got a couple kids who are pretty excited right out of the gate, and so we would want to work with
Great.
that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Excuse me, Doctor, I have one more question. When we talk of 50 students along those same lines that Director Mason started the question, these particular pathway courses or
The preparatory version of the pathway, yeah.
Yes,
The preparatory portion.
could be open to students outside of the district.
That all depends if we decide to go with a skill center model or a skill center-like model, right?
Okay.
So and we're going to study that this year with our WANIC partnership.
Okay,
So that's a good point.
thank you.
I just have more of a statement. Darcy and Molly, I thanked you earlier during my board comments, so I'm going to thank you now that you're here again for showing me around. And just want to give some of the highlights of what I saw at the 3 elementary schools, just really quickly. 2 of the schools I had honestly not been to before, so it was a delight to see. But Darcy and Molly both pointed out to me some of the seismic issues with a whole lot of brick in cafeterias and gyms that if there was a quake, could come down. And then talking about security, that there are badge access, but on all 3 of the schools, no ability for vestibules. So they go into open hallways so that it is limiting, unlike some of our other schools. And then walking into Lowell, the way to get in is stairs. So it's not ADA compliant. And then at Jackson, not able to be able to put an elevator in there because of the different elevations. But one thing about both mostly Madison and Jackson, that they very much are older schools in their community. And, how do we talked to a couple of staff people that would like to keep that same feel. And it'll be interesting to see where the design happens. But looking at, they took me to View Ridge to show what a North End school looks like, but really comparing it to Tambark with all the glass, all the built-ins, all of the collaboration space, and how can we make those schools have those same educational standards. It was really fun to see. But also, I think for those community members who see solid schools, because those are some solid schools, Jackson and Madison, but to know that they've used up their lifespan, and you can see that when you walk through them. And I felt very tall with those low ceilings. So, but thank you, and I just really appreciate the tours, because that does help me as we go out and do this. So thank you.
Okay. Before we move on to the vote, I again just want to say a very big thank you to the Capital Bond Planning Committee members. I think they provided the board with a very fresh perspective on capital needs and priorities. And I think we've been very remiss in not thanking you, Mr. Gunn, for all your work as well with the committee and also other staff. I realize facilities and maintenance and finance, and everyone was involved in this committee. But I realize, or I know their recommendation was based on being provided very good information and resources and given great guidance. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
So we will move to the, I'll call for a motion on the recommended action, and that is that the Board of Directors approve Resolution 1216, Unlimited Tax General Obligation Bonds. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Directors approve Resolution number 1216 for a capital bond proposal in the amount of $317.4 million for placement on the April 28th, 2020 special election ballot.
I will second.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Director Mason and seconded by Director Mitchell, to approve Resolution number 1216 for the capital bond in the amount of $317.4 million for placement on the April 28th, 2020 special election ballot. All those in favor say,
Is there any discussion?
Is there any discussion? I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Is there any discussion?
Yes. May I?
Director Lasay.
I am very happy that we had the opportunity for the committee to go around to the different schools and take a look at what the conditions of our schools look like. And I would like to thank them for taking that time to do that and share what they saw to the board. I would like to also thank all of the committees' work in what they did do, and I appreciate very much what they have done. I am very happy that the goal was to provide something for every region. I still believe that we could do much more in the South region because that is where we are experiencing a very large growth in the county, in the city, and in our community. And I think there are a lot of people who live in that area who will feel that way, who feel that we need to work on solving the problem of a high school in that neighborhood. I think Jackson High School, as it's a wonderful high school, it's done wonderful work. And the 450 approximately students that will probably leave there and go on to Cascade will have a wonderful experience there. And I'm very happy about that. But as that community continues to grow over the next 5 years, we're going to need a new high school, and we are kicking the can down the road. But I am very happy that we are working on maintaining the facilities that we currently have. And we are looking at what they need as far as security and the well-being of the students that are there, as well as the staff that's there. I wish we had the opportunity to include the high school in this bond because as it continues down the road, it's going to be a more expensive high school to build in the future. And we will come up to a time when there will be students that cannot fit in Jackson anymore, that will need another place, and that will be experiencing an overcrowded situation and may not get on the football team, may not get in the AP classes, may not be able to have lunch at a proper time. And in some regards, we are kicking the can down the road. But I'm very happy that we are looking at how we can maintain our infrastructure that we currently have.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? Historically, we have voted, I believe, on our ability to speak publicly about such a bond. Is there a plan for a vote tonight, or am I remembering things incorrectly that we have to vote so that we can publicly endorse a bond? For some reason, I recall that we've done that.
Maybe I could chime in on that.
please.
That vote we have taken, you've taken, the board
Yeah.
has taken in the past, and it's been at a subsequent board meeting, subsequent to the approval of the resolution.
Okay, so like at the November 5th meeting, if we
Yes,
could do such a
or
vote, okay.
one of the November meetings, we would,
Okay.
if you request it, we would bring such a
I
resolution.
just don't know if it's
forward.
required, because I just
Yeah.
historically remember it happening. That's my
Yes.
only question. Thank you.
I think to follow up to Director Lassane's comments, we do have a growth issue in the South End. And I think, in some ways it's a good problem to have. People want to move to our district, attend our schools. That's a wonderful thing. And we are also fortunate that we have the capacity in our existing high schools to deal with that population issue and have that overcrowding kind of evened out among the schools for the time being and allow us some time in the future to address the high school need. So we're fortunate in many ways and do have some issues to deal with, but we have time. So are there any other comments? Okay, we will now move to the vote then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you.
I would like to thank you all for your support for this.
Thank you.
And we have principals here that hopefully they're going to go tell their staff tomorrow.
It's exciting. That is a wonderful conclusion. I think my horoscope said something today about finalizing a project and moving forward. So, all you Aries out there, we did it. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Go home and rest. feel better. Yeah. Section 13.0, new business. There is no new business. So Dr. Saltzman, under section 14, can you please talk about our upcoming agenda items?
Yes, ma'am. At the October 15th special meeting, the board will have a study session on the following: bonds, communication, strategy, and community engagement. On the regular meeting on November 5th, 2019, that meeting will be discussed post-secondary enrollment patterns, summer reading program scholarship recognition, career and tech ed program evaluation, and we'll have a special performance by the Jackson High School Drama Club.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. That's
They're doing
also
the Addams
election
Family?
night, right?
Pardon? They're doing the Addams Family musical?
Good. Okay. We do not have any executive session this evening, so we are to adjournment, and this concludes the business scheduled to come before the Board of Directors on October 8th. 2019 meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.